Scientists predict that by the year 2050, the world will need twice as much electricity as it does today to power an economy worth over $100 trillion. But oil is running out, uranium is scarce, and the sun never rises at night. In Asia, a group of engineers has quietly revived a technology that the United States abandoned more than half a century ago. In just 7 days, they approved 10 projects worth $27 billion, and what they discovered in the middle of the desert might make the entire world reconsider how we generate electricity. What pushed them to act so urgently, and how did they actually discover this project? Let's dive in and find out. Have you ever imagined a giant nation like China, the world's factory, struggling because of a power shortage? Yes, that actually happened. During the energy crisis of 2020 to 2023, the world's second largest economy, worth $18 trillion, suddenly felt like a massive engine skipping a beat. Hard to believe, isn't it? A country that produces more than 25% of the world's electricity had to enforce rolling blackouts across more than 20 provinces, from Guangdong all the way to Liaoning. The root cause lay in dependence. Over 70% of the uranium fuel for China's nuclear power plants had to be imported from Kazakhstan, Canada, or Australia. Meanwhile, coal, the backbone of China's energy, was depleting fast and heavily restricted due to pollution. Hydropower relied on the weather. In 2022 alone, water levels in the Yangtze River dropped to a record low, cutting power output by 20%. And renewable sources like wind and solar, they were unstable, requiring massive battery storage systems and relying on rare earth metals largely controlled by the West. But China wouldn't be China if it didn't come up with a smart solution, and we're about to find out what it is. The government quietly launched a $3 billion project, a collaboration between the Chinese Academy of Sciences and Tsinghua University, to revive a forgotten form of energy. Thorium. Sounds unfamiliar, right? It was discovered in 1828 by Swedish chemist Jöns Jakob Berzelius and named after Thor, the Norse god of thunder. It may seem distant, but it could be right under your feet. On Earth, thorium exists in amounts 3 times greater than uranium, the element the world has worshipped as the fuel of the atomic age. Just 1 ton of thorium can produce the same energy as 3.5 million tons of coal. Even better, it can generate 200 times more energy than uranium. Imagine this. With just a small truck loaded with thorium, you could replace an entire coal train stretching for miles. At the Bayan Obo mine in Inner Mongolia, China, it's estimated that more than 1 million tons of thorium lie underground. That amount is enough to light up China for 60,000 years. Yes, you heard that right? Thorium. Sounds amazing, right? Yet, for nearly 200 years, almost no one has paid attention to it. In fact, one nation discovered thorium half a century before China did, but couldn't make use of it. That nation was the United States. Back in the 1960s, scientist Alvin Weinberg successfully operated a revolutionary type of nuclear reactor, the molten salt reactor. It was safer, cleaner, and, most importantly, incapable of exploding like Chernobyl or Fukushima. But because it was too safe, it didn't produce plutonium, the key ingredient for nuclear weapons. And as you can imagine, during the Cold War, clean energy was far less attractive than deterrent weapons. Weinberg was fired. The project was shut down. Thousands of engineering blueprints gathered dust in the archives of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. If they had continued that project back then, what might have happened? Even we can't imagine. Half a century later, on the other side of the planet, a team of Chinese engineers stumbled upon those forgotten designs. Leading the effort was Xu Hongjie, head researcher at the Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics. He earned a strange nickname, the Nuclear Monk, because for 20 years his team lived in near isolation, patiently redrawing every old diagram by hand. "If the Americans won't do it, we will," he said, calmly, but with the weight of a vow. And then, in 2021, in the middle of the Gobi Desert, just 75 miles from the city of Wuwei in Gansu province, the world's only thorium reactor came to life. They flipped the switch on the first molten salt thorium reactor ever built, with a modest output of just 2 megawatts, enough to power 1,000 homes. It operates at normal atmospheric pressure, doesn't use water for cooling, and carries no risk of steam explosions. Western media couldn't help but exclaim, "The reactor America dreamed of, but never built." Do you know why, despite being praised as the fuel of the future, thorium still hasn't been widely adopted around the world? It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? The truth is that thorium-232, the only naturally occurring isotope of thorium, cannot undergo fission on its own like uranium-235. It's like an uncut gem with enormous potential, but it needs a spark to shine. Inside a reactor, thorium must be bombarded with high-energy neutrons to transform into uranium-233, an isotope capable of true fission that can generate electricity. The process is complex and demands extremely precise technology. And that's why, for more than half a century, humanity has stuck with uranium, even knowing that this forgotten gem could change the world. But China refuses to stand on the sidelines. They chose a different path: molten salt technology, where thorium doesn't have to be packed into solid fuel rods, but is instead dissolved directly into molten fluoride salt heated to 300 degrees. Instead of relying on water for cooling, the reactor regulates itself through the dense, lava-like flow of the molten salt. Remember Chernobyl in 1986 or Fukushima in 2011? Both disasters began with the same thing: boiling water, rising pressure, and humans losing control. But the Gobi Desert is different. There's no water, no pressure, and nothing that can explode. If a traditional uranium reactor is like a giant pressure cooker, where even a small leak could mean disaster, then a molten salt reactor is more like a pot of simmering soup. Even if you lift the lid, it quietly keeps releasing gentle heat. Even more incredible, this reactor can be refueled while it's still running, something every other nuclear plant can only dream of. And if something goes wrong, the molten fuel automatically drains into a safety tank and solidifies. No reactor meltdown, no radioactive clouds. On top of that, the molten salt reactor allows fuel to be added or removed during operation. No shutdowns, no multi-million-dollar refueling pauses. Do you see what that flexibility means? A power plant that can run continuously, fine-tuning its fuel on demand, something conventional reactors have never achieved. The first experimental unit produces just 2 megawatts, enough to power about 1,000 homes, but that's only the beginning. In the next phase, China plans to build a 60-megawatt version, scheduled to begin construction in 2025 and finish by 2029. Sounds far off? Maybe. But if history tells us anything, every time China promises the impossible, the world ends up watching them pull it off a few years later. And here's another game changer. Because it doesn't require water for cooling, China's thorium reactor is like a mobile, self-sufficient power plant. It's not tied to coastal locations like traditional nuclear facilities. You could place it in the middle of the Gobi Desert, where temperatures swing from 40 degrees Celsius to plus 104 degrees Celsius, or even in the remote plateaus of Tibet, as long as power lines can reach it. What's even more astonishing is that thorium can feed itself. During the reaction, it breeds uranium-233, a new fuel even stronger than what it consumes. That means instead of depleting resources like oil, each operating cycle actually produces more fuel for the future. As the world races to fight climate change, this technology suddenly looks like the green key humanity once forgot. At COP28 in 2023, more than 20 nations pledged to triple their nuclear power capacity by 2050. And thorium, it's clearly becoming the ace up humanity's sleeve. What's even more remarkable is that China controls 97% of the world's rare earth supply, the essential elements used in smartphones, electric vehicles, and wind turbines. And thorium happens to be embedded right within those rare earth mines, almost like a bonus prize of industrial strategy. While the United States, Canada, and Australia must import uranium, China simply digs a little deeper into its own mineral reserves. At this point, the story goes beyond technology. It's about national energy security. As the number of China's nuclear reactors grows rapidly, its uranium reserves are no longer sufficient. Thorium has become the escape route, drastically reducing imports and ensuring long-term energy independence. And if China manages to fully master MSR thorium technology, molten salt reactor thorium, it could export this model to developing nations, reshaping the global balance of power in clean energy. But perhaps every dream of energy comes with a dark side. Look toward Baotou, Inner Mongolia, often called the rare earth valley of the world. Yet instead of a green valley, there lies a black radioactive sludge lake nearly 4 square miles wide. From above, it looks like a giant scar across the desert, a place that was once fertile watermelon farmland. Now, not a single fish can survive there, and the local cancer rate is 5 times higher than the national average. We call it clean energy, but to produce it, China is sacrificing its own land. Every ton of rare earth is extracted using acid baths, and every cubic meter of toxic waste, filled with thorium, uranium, and heavy metals, is dumped straight into the lake. The air smells of chemicals, sulfur, and burning metal, the very air that residents breathe every single day. As one environmental activist once said, "It's ironic. China is saving the planet by killing the ground it stands on." And that statement, sadly, isn't wrong. But the story of thorium doesn't belong to China alone, because this element still holds the key to the world's energy future. In India, a country that possesses nearly 20% of the world's thorium reserves, the story began all the way back in the 1950s. While the West was chasing plutonium for weapons, India saw thorium as its ace card for long-term energy independence. Along the coasts of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, scientists discovered beaches rich in monazite sand, so loaded with thorium that they literally glow under UV light. Yet, after more than 70 years, India's thorium reactors remain stuck in the experimental phase. Why? Because of the massive costs, and because the world never truly saw thorium as the answer. It remains a dream still waiting to awaken. Meanwhile, in Europe, traditionally cautious when it comes to nuclear energy, a quiet wave of innovation is emerging. In 2023, Denmark and Switzerland joined forces to develop a molten salt thorium reactor, a 4-year collaboration backed by tens of millions of dollars. Their goal is clear: to create a compact, self-cooling reactor capable of powering an entire mid-sized city without the need for massive, complex safety systems. And that's not all. In the Netherlands, the energy startup Thorizon is building the Thorizon 1 molten salt reactor with a planned capacity of 250 megawatts, enough to power more than 250,000 homes. What's fascinating is their approach. Instead of using pure thorium, they're recycling nuclear waste as fuel. A truly poetic vision, cleaning up the past to power the future. And that is the story of the forgotten element, a metal that once slept quietly beneath the earth, now igniting a new global race for energy. China dared to do what the rest of humanity only talked about, turning sand into electricity, turning the desert into life. But the question remains, is thorium truly the future, or just another dangerous dream of mankind? Share your thoughts below. Do you believe in the Gobi fire pot? And if you love stories about mega projects, bold experiments, and technologies that could change the world, don't forget to subscribe, because we've only just begun to tell this story.